I don't want people to hear you say some of that. 5 seconds.
Give it a few more than 5, just in case. Hate to start before the tape works.
We are 5 years.
Meeting of the Somerville Planning Board for February 22nd, 2023 will please come to order. A copy of the notice specifying the date, time, and location was posted on the bulletin board outside Borough Hall, 2 mailed to the Messenger Gazette, and 3 given to the clerk administrator. So this meeting is being held in compliance with the Open Public Meeting Act. Okay, what do we have next? We have roll call and pledge of allegiance.
Chairman Novato,
Here.
Ms. Rosinski, here. Mayor Sullivan,
Here.
Councilman Broom,
Here.
Ms. Adair advised she would be absent, Mr. Akins,
Here.
Mr. Kraska,
Here.
Mr. Korestes,
Here.
Mr. Cleveland,
Here.
Mr. Addicks,
Here.
Ms. Werner. Here.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first we have 3 resolutions, one for Abdul Lanani for 190 West Main Street.
I will move it.
Second.
Second was Mayor?
Yes.
Additions?
Nope.
Okay, roll call.
Chairman Novato,
Yes.
Ms. Rosinski,
Yes.
Mayor Sullivan,
Yes.
Councilman Broom,
Yes.
Mr. Akins,
Yes.
Mr. Kraska is ineligible, Mr. Korestes,
Yes.
Mr. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mr. Addicks,
Yes.
and Ms. Werner is ineligible.
Okay, next up we have 254 Altamont Place.
I will move it.
Second.
What's the second? Councilman?
Okay, any questions, comments? Okay, roll call.
Chairman Novato,
Yes.
Ms. Rosinski,
Yes.
Mayor Sullivan,
Yes.
Councilman Broom is ineligible.
Wait, he's ineligible?
Not
Should be eligible.
Last week.
You were here for that meeting, yes.
Yeah.
50 Kirby.
Nope, we're on Amelia. I don't think anyone was ineligible except for Kraska anymore.
Yes for me.
Councilman.
Check the tape.
Mr. Akins,
Yes.
Mr. Korestes,
Yes.
Mr. Cleveland,
Yes.
and Mr. Addicks.
Yes.
Okay, next up 50 Kirby Avenue.
Okay, this one we do have one minor change to. Paragraph 2 on page 4, it's just a typo. We just forgot some language saying that they had the option of doing either or. So it should read, the resolution provided the applicant with the option of installing either the NFPA 13R sprinkler system with additional sprinklers in the quote unoccupied areas, close quote, or the NFPA 13 sprinkler system with the determination to be made by the applicant at the time of application for a building permit.
Okay,
I will move it.
Second.
okay, that's with the correction, right?
With the correction,
Okay,
Chairman Novato,
yes.
Ms. Rosinski,
yes.
Mayor Sullivan, Councilman Broom is ineligible, Ms. Adair is absent, Mr. Akins,
Yes.
Mr. Kraska is ineligible, Mr. Korestes
Yes.
is eligible.
Okay, so he's ineligible, so we need somebody else for the second. You made the second.
No, I'm not eligible. I'm eligible.
He was here for that. He was here, but you didn't vote on the original resolution.
Oh, the original
Oh,
version,
oh,
yeah,
oh,
okay.
Yeah,
I
so,
preceded your.
yeah, so
Well,
I'm
somebody
sorry,
else
let's
has
go,
to do the
Chris.
second.
Yeah, we need a second on the
I
motion.
can second it.
Chris, okay.
Mr. Cleveland
Yes.
and Mr. Addicks,
Yes.
and Ms. Werner is ineligible.
Okay.
Oh, wait, the original was, were you here for the original? I might have been I actually. think you were here for the original of all that stuff.
Mike, do you have anything on the Route 22 warehouse in Bridgewater?
Next meeting's on March 7th. We will be attending it, and we're still on the first witness. And they're taking questions from the first witness, an engineer, site civil. So we'll probably be there for a couple hours for him. And we'll go from there. Get the board updated from there.
No indication they might be adjourning or anything like that, right?
I will reach out later when it gets closer, but right now, no.
Okay. Next, we have a discussion on floor area ratio, which any of you who've been here for any period of time know that is stuck in my craw for a long period of time. And last time we discussed it, which was years ago, we left it in. And one of the impacts that has taken place since then is that applications that might otherwise and were intended to go to the planning board were diverted to the Board of Adjustment because they exceeded the floor area ratio. One was the hospital. Years ago, we created a hospital zone so that the planning board would be able to work with the hospital, create rules within which they could live, and then those applications would come to the planning board. Well, it didn't happen this time, it went to the Board of Adjustment. And while the burden of proof is greater at the Board of Adjustment because a hospital is an inherently beneficial use, they're gonna get it anyway. It's gonna be approved. And even if it isn't approved, they can go to court and they will be approved. The judge will say, do it. The other one that's coming up, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if it was last meeting or meeting before, we had someone in here who wanted to subdivide a garage at 41 West High Street and create a museum fronting on the parking lot. And that's going to end up before the Board of Adjustment because as soon as the subdivision goes through, it's a violation of the FAR. We would be creating a subdivision violating FAR. Am I on base with that?
I'm being told it's still an FAR, but it's a two-family, so it's in front of the zoning board. I thought it was a single family. I'm not 100% sure of that.
It's a
The
two-family.
one we just saw for the
The
gallery?
Keller.
Yeah, that was a
Yeah.
one family.
I'm being told right now it's being operated as a two. I don't know if I have it right.
Currently it is.
It's going to be a one-family. That's what their application is going to be for the house.
Which is not filed yet, correct? The
Correct.
application itself?
The house is gonna go to one family and it'll be a small apartment above the gallery. Those are the two
That's
living
correct.
spaces.
Right, but that will be subdivided.
Which will be one on each lot.
But if it's subdivided as a two-family, then that goes to the Board of Adjustment.
Back to a one, to its original use?
Well, if they change the use prior to the application, then it's conforming use, then it becomes the FAR.
And you're talking about the big house, not the.
I'm talking about the big house.
Okay,
And the FAR is not far off, and I haven't got this in writing, but the engineer's saying they're not gonna make it. So it's back to what the chairman said, assuming that they went back to a single family use.
on the big house.
On the big house, right now I'm being told it's a two-family.
Well, that's what their testimony was.
Right.
It was going to go back to
One family.
a single family.
Right.
At any rate, I think, and I may be out of step with some planning circles, but I think FAR is not something that we need in Somerville. We can regulate setbacks, we can regulate building height, we can regulate improvement coverage. Why do we need something as abstract as floor area ratio to determine what it is we want to see in any given lot and any given zone? Because it applies to a whole zone, not just, and, you know, I think we did a good job of applying those bulk standards to developments like we've had around the train station and on Main Street and on Veterans Memorial Drive. And we didn't run into floor area ratio issues there, but there are places where we will run into floor area ratio issues. And I wanted to have another discussion about it. I would like to see it eliminated completely from all zones, because we have the means to regulate what we want to see. You know, and all of those other things, all the setbacks, the height requirements, the improvement coverage, all of those combine to give us what we need. And some of those can be exceeded by this board. We can grant variances for that. It doesn't automatically kick it to another board or to the Board of Adjustment because we need a setback variance. And to me, I think our job is to make recommendations to the governing body to have zoning regulations that make sense. And to me, floor area ratio does not make sense. I will entertain conversation on this because that's what we're here to do.
Bernie, could I ask our planner, just for the intent of what FAR is supposed to do, that is not covered with the restrictions and the standards that Bernie mentioned?
Well, it's basically the restricted size of the building. And I was curious on this, and I just calculated using the bulk standards with or without FAR. And for every zone, the building can get 3 times bigger using the current setbacks. The only zone I didn't do is 2 zones I couldn't fit in a piece of paper. I looked at the improvement coverage, and generally speaking, the improvement coverage is so high that it's not the limiting factor. Right now, the limiting factor is the FAR on almost everything. Like if you look at the R1, if you look at the 10,000, right now you're allowed 2,500, which is in keeping, in my opinion, of the houses in the area. If you got rid of the FAR, you can go to 7,150, 7,000 square foot house. So that's the concern I have, because I just looked at the setbacks and ran all the numbers, because I was curious myself. If we get rid of the FAR, just the improvement coverage and the setbacks at the current height, keep the developments. Now, when I say in keeping, I'm more talking about the residential POR zones.
Yes, yeah.
The downtown, we don't have I say the borough, it doesn't have an FAR for B1 and B2 because we allow essentially the whole footprint and we regulate it by height essentially. So I think it works for the B1 and B2. And I said, so B3 and the county government doesn't have an FAR. Frankly, because it's a higher authority, so you can have an FAR, but
They don't.
you can say anything you want, it's the county, so. So I just did one sheet. I was shocked at the garden apartments. If you look at the 2.5 garden apartments, it goes from 20,000 to 60,000 using the setbacks on the square footage. So I think, I understand what the chairman is saying. I just think that maybe we look at some other things if it's not FAR, improvement coverage, something. I just don't know. The problem with improvement coverage is the driveways and all the rest of the stuff that you have to factor in. So it's hard to restrict the improvement coverage without.
Can I just ask a stupid question just for clarification? How can the senior housing have more than 100% of the lot area?
That's easy. You go on.
Oh, because of the additional
It's tall,
floors. Okay,
tall.
gotcha. I'm sitting here looking at it, I'm going, meh.
It's 10 stories is a lot.
So, okay.
But that was like a special case
Yeah.
back when they built that.
Gotcha, okay, I was,
So- To put my 2 cents worth in, I think as an architect and looking at neighborhoods, the reason you have an FAR is the nature of a person to build as much square footage as possible is to take the box, 35 feet high, and the boundaries and fill it, and that's where these square footages are. If you have an FAR, you end up with pitched roofs, bay windows, you end up with design on these things that keep to the character of the neighborhood. So, for example, the neighborhood over by the hospital with those small starter homes, people will just rip them down and they'll go up 35 feet with a flat roof and fill that as a box, and that whole neighborhood will change completely. So FAR keeps that from happening by limiting the amount of floor area ratio you can have. And so, you know, I'm all for looking at, do we up it a little bit because of today's demands and things, but if we don't have an FAR in the residential areas, we're going to end up with just boxes that are filled with square footage inside, because people are going to use up their square footage as best they can with flat roofs, with no more pitched roofs, and things like that. And so that's what happens if you go to certain shore towns when they let that happen. You can see all the boxes lining where the little bungalows used to be, and that's because there's no FAR. So for things like the hospital and business districts, we build out anyway, so I don't think that's an issue. And if it's only been one or two things that have an FAR problem that go to the Board of Adjustment, is that a problem for the whole town?
Have you ever seen like an ordinance that requires the upper floors to be smaller in size than the first floor? And that being a mechanism that gets some of that character or anything like that?
I had,
Having that as a requirement.
Setback.
Setback, well, that's what the
Well,
wedding
the
cake
stepping
building's
back.
in, yeah, that's a
Some-
wedding cake building like in the city. If you step it back and you step it back and you kind of,
Well, the one across the street that's going in,
Yes,
yeah,
right across the street.
exactly.
From the
it's
parking
stepping
lot.
back, yeah.
They approved that, the first plan was too big. It's like that was all parking issues, it's like a
Yes.
little smaller, but it does slightly terrace back. But
I agree, I think there's
But how would,
ways,
how would?
that was written into the redevelopment plan.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
like outside
So
of this.
that does have a floor area ratio restriction.
No, it doesn't.
No.
That was had to do with parking or something. Yeah, that was,
for
that did
most
not.
of the redevelopment zones, downtown ones, we're not concerned with that. We look at the aesthetics and does it fit essentially? Because we are building out the lots, the downtown. So we haven't used it in West Main Street. And Colin, do we use it in the ECBD?
What,
Overlay zone, I think we,
No, we don't use it.
yeah. So I think
So
a
it's
lot of
in the
our denser
resident- yeah.
redevelopment zones.
So, I have a question, that the hospital area is a R2?
No, I don't have
It
that.
says
I
it
ran
gets
out of space.
100%.
Not the hospital
Oh, the
zone.
area
but
around
the
it.
area
Yes.
around it.
Yeah,
No,
I
It's
think it's, I think it's
East,
R2.
east of the hospitals R2, west of it's R1 in
Right.
some cases.
Yeah.
Okay, so my question is, have we had any applications? Do you recall any applications for people that were or would have been restricted by the FAR? I mean, and I understand what you're saying, David, about the people building to the box,
Yeah.
but has it happened? Has anybody tried?
No,
to
because
do
of
that?
FAR. Because of the FAR, they'd have to go before the Board of Adjustments and have a good reason for building a box, and I think they would get turned down.
And they would
quite
not have to
frankly,
waste the
yeah.
money to do it.
Yeah.
Well, the house that exploded, the one next to it, it
Yeah.
had setbacks. It just came in for an FAR because they wanted to raise the house so high, because of concern that the walkout became a story above grade. So it became a 3-story, and then we wrestled with the issue of the walkout basement. Does
If
that
it's
count
FAR or not.
towards the FAR?
So that's what I was thinking, maybe we have to look at our definitions of what counts for FAR.
Yeah.
Like
that needs to be
porches
refreshed.
and walkout basements and maybe things like that need to be redefined, more than getting rid of it altogether, especially in the residential areas.
What we're having in some of the infills, which isn't a lot, 75 acres subdivision, is one builder likes to go with 8 and 9 foot ceiling heights in the basement and finish it out. So the question becomes, does that become living space?
Right.
And to go back to what Deidre says, the definition, the ordinance, is if you guys saw it, you would cringe. The attic is very clear, the basement is not very clear, it's clear as mud on whether that counts as FAR. So I think it'd be nice, it'd be prudent to look at. We did this, what was it, 8 years ago in the
2003,
residential zones?
Yeah,
Yeah,
And maybe we should look at the FAR and some of the bulk standards in general that's affecting the whole.
yeah, and another one that I'm looking at, and what brought this to mind was the application for 41 was high was if you look at the R2, for instance, the maximum FAR is 30. And in a POR district, it's 25. If anything, to me, it should be higher.
The same, or at least the same.
Well, I think it's the lot size. Some of the
Yeah.
PR lots are huge. Substantially bigger than R1 or R2, except for some R1s. which are
But
very-
you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
And what we envisioned originally was the business district, a layer cake. Business district, then the buffer zoning was the POR,
Yeah.
and then the residential zone. So I think there's a lot of places where if we're not going to eliminate it, we need certainly to tweak it and take a hard look at what we're doing.
That
I agree with
definition should be
Can we
changed.
see that definition? Can you send?
I didn't know where we're going tonight. I just printed this out because after 18 years, I kind of know the
Curious,
questions.
Yeah,
This is
So the chairman didn't ask me to do this. I was curious myself, and I missed one zone. I just didn't want to do another sheet.
yeah.
I wanted to fit it all in one sheet. And you can look at the improvement coverages I did. I didn't put it on here because they're at 50%. 50% of 10,000 is 5,000 times 2 is 10,000. It's not limiting anything. in improvement.
Well,
So,
yeah, but 50%, well, this is the R1, and improvement coverage is 35%. So we're not actually getting up to 7,100 because improvement coverage covers
the driveway.
the driveway and the sidewalks. So we're actually below 3,500, not at 7,000. So I understand where you're going with this,
Right.
but we have other standards in here that serve to limit it as well. So what looks like 7,100 here is actually probably gonna be closer to 3,000 or under by the time you figure the other.
Well, if you have 500 square feet of the driveway and sidewalk, and the footprint's 3,000 times 2 is 6,000. So that's where it gets gray with the improvement coverage, because you can still have the height of the improvement coverage. It's just, we didn't count for the driveway and sidewalk, so maybe it's 10 or 15% less of the improvement coverage, but the rest of it could be a big box, is what Adrian says. So it's very close. Sometimes it's exceeding. If you look at the industrial zones, it's not even close because of the size of the parcels. If you look at it. Now, we don't do a lot of applications in the industrial zone. I think we've done some ambulances, and we approved, wasn't it a brewery at one point, Colin, in the I-2?
Yeah,
It was a brewery. We put in one of the redevelopment plans. We talked about this.
Yeah.
And I thought we put a brewery in I-1 or I-2, but it got no traction. So we haven't seen any applications substantial in the I-zones, period, in 20 years, 18 years. The action appears to be right now, the residential's in downtown. That's where we see all the action. Right now, I don't know if it's the post-COVID, what's happening, but the people in the offices renovating their housing is just keeping the zoning board very busy. And everybody's converting to apartments. For example, the Hauser building across from Borough Hall, they're proposing to convert all those 4 stories of offices to apartments.
Did they figure out where to do the parking?
They
Well,
came in 2 years ago.
Yeah, they did.
I did the same rule I told you. I stopped at 30 pages.
Yeah.
And I did a draft, and it went out to the applicant, and we haven't had a meeting since. I don't know where it's going, but
Yeah, but
there's a
everybody's.
share, what I'm saying, everybody, and we're having tear downs and people putting apart those, and 2 tear downs in POR. There's one for the old bank, Dwight Jones. He's proposing 2 there and put a 12-unit apartment building in.
What bank?
The old bank that's now the office across from Gaston in East Main. Okay, you go
Where the
down.
daycare center was gonna
They
go.
used to have a drive-through
Yeah.
counter, it hasn't been,
Yes.
I don't know when's the last time it was a bank, maybe
It was
30
gonna be a
years ago.
daycare center.
It predates me. I don't know, it was originally a bank, I was told.
Yeah.
He's proposing, and he owns the building next to it, that's on South Gaston, you know, the dog leg there. And he's proposing to rip both those buildings down and put a 12-unit apartment building And that's coming in front of the Board of Adjustment next week. No, next month. So we're getting a lot of
Why is it going
apartments.
before the Board of Adjustment for use?
Use variance, namely, it's in the POR, it's a 12-unit building. I don't think it's an FAR, I can take another look at that, but that's the kind of stuff we're getting, is a lot of conversions to multifamily. Residential is so hot.
Well, that's why we have a Board of Adjustment with those issues. What my concern is people having to go to the Board of Adjustment where the burden of proof is much higher than it is here. Inadvertently, without that being intended. And the hospital is one example of that, where do we want to, and within reason, but we have the height restrictions, we have the setbacks. Do we really want to restrict where the hospital's going because of an FAR calculation? And that's, so maybe.
So right now they have 100% as their maximum FAR for the hospital and related uses. So we just want to give them unlimited FAR?
Well, we proposed 105, and
Yeah.
I don't think council supported that. That
Okay.
was last year, the year before. We came back with a recommendation to raise the FAR, and it was not acted on by council.
Okay.
But I think right now they're at 103%.
They're 100%, yeah.
Now, right now with the addition, they're over by, I think, 3%. It's 103%, back to what the chairman's saying. And what the chairman's saying is, what's the point of having a hospital zone if you have to go to the zoning board? Why don't we just call it the odd zone? It doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
Because they're going to the zone of adjustment, and he's saying it's a planned zone. If it's a planned zone, it should come to the planning board. Is that what you essentially do?
So on something like that, something that specific, then I think we can look at the FAR differently than we look at the residential neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Do you want to give definitions? If you want to ultimately say, you're saying that they're unclear.
The basement, if you read that paragraph, it's clear as mud.
Yeah, so FAR definition is a sum of the gross floor area of all buildings, which in and of itself only has a small exception for garages. Gross floor area, you exempt out roofed or enclosed areas devoted exclusively for off-street parking and loading. So if you have a garage but you're not
Doesn't
parking in it, then it counts.
Yes, but.
And otherwise, if you're parking in,
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
It also does not include floors in basement areas, attic areas, and any floor area where the floor to ceiling height shall be less than 7 feet.
Right, but if you have a walkout 8-foot basement.
Keep reading that, it gets better.
Provided when such areas are used or intended to be used
Keep
for
going.
human habitation, work, or service areas other than dead storage or mechanical equipment, providing essential services to the building its gross floor area, for determining the required number of parking spaces.
For parking.
So something's got to be done to that regardless. of
Yeah.
what you
Don't
decide.
you love that? That paragraph is just wonderful, isn't it?
What happens in a case, and there's lots of these around, a case like my garage, which is a 2-story garage.
Is it the carriage house?
Do you use the second floor? Or is it storage?
It's storage.
Yeah, so then it doesn't count.
But
And
it
actually,
wouldn't necessarily have to be, I could put a rec room up there.
well, you could,
Well,
and
I
that's.
don't know. See, it says gross floor area does not include enclosed areas devoted exclusively to off-street parking and loading. If he uses that second floor for storage, that second floor has got to be included. The first floor, provided you use it for loading or parking. If you don't, you use it for storage, that's included too.
Yeah, but it's under the roof, and under the roof definition, which is attic definition, used for storage, it would not count.
Well,
That's the problem.
back
And
to-
that's where you get a little nuts.
This is
because-
why I would like to refresh the definitions of
Yeah.
FAR to be very
So,
clear.
so if, for instance, I convert my 2-story garage to a rec room above and a bar area with a wet bar and
That changes
and
your
whatever
Yes.
on the first floor, that counts as floor area for FAR.
For the whole site, yeah.
Cancel the pool table then.
But that's, I mean,
Well,
this is going back to
well,
how
that's-
we use
that-
those
that
detached
makes
garage
sense,
and
yeah.
buildings. And I think
Yes.
we need to look at that also. That's the other thing I think we have to really start looking at, is these barns, garages that are detached and pretty substantial in size, and can we use them more wisely in town, type of thing? Or is it not included in FAR, it's just improvement coverage or something to that
I have
effect?
another question for Mike. In the Victory Home area east of the hospital, there have been a couple of tear downs and rebuilds and a couple of complete renovations. Did any of those, do you know, go to the zoning board? Because you attend zoning board.
Well, they all go because there's 1 and 2 families, so the site plan is exempt.
They're all ones.
So they're all one family,
They're all
so if there's a setback or
They were basically built on this, not on the
Right.
same foundation, but basically the same footprint, just a bigger house with a full second floor.
we've had a couple for,
There's one
if
on
they
Putnam.
exacerbate the side yard setback. In
There's one
addition-
on
But
Putnam.
setback's not FAR that they're there for.
Yeah,
There's one on Putnam, one on North Adamsville, and there's another one on, I think Adams was a tear down. And then they basically took the cake and
Went up a second floor.
made a full story. For instance, my house has 625 square feet on the ground floor,
yeah.
and with the dormers and the pitched roof on the top floor, we have 400 square feet. So it's not a full squared off house, like some of them in the neighborhood have evolved into that.
But you probably are below the FAR if you did your calculations on your lot.
Yeah, I have an undersized lot to begin with, so the whole street was, they carved up 6 feet of each lot to put an extra lot at the bottom. So it's, I could never, I'd have to be at the zoning board for anything I needed. The zoning board in Bridgewater, by the way, because I can't use our zoning board, but I haven't done anything structural to the house other than just paint it.
Yeah, and that's another thing I think we're gonna have to look at sometime in the near future is, we've got the R2 zone in particular, which covers a wide variety of lot sizes and housing types. And, we had a few years ago, we had a subcommittee that looked into that and we never pursued it, never went anywhere with it, but I think we need to take another look at it and maybe drill down on some of these neighborhoods that have lot sizes that are not 5,000 square feet, but have houses on them. And maybe establish a reasonable set of rules, because right now, a lot of those houses don't comply at all.
Yeah.
So to put an addition on a house that doesn't apply, to put even a partial second story on, you're violating not just, it has nothing to do with FAR, it's setback, and it's already non-conforming because the lot's too small, because you're violating the setbacks, whatever.
Well, we dealt with some of that. I think we did go through all that and deal with some of these lots that everybody's already in violation of the setback rules and having to deal with
Didn't we
those.
change the
Yeah.
rear and side setbacks?
Yes, we
Yeah.
did.
Sheds
Yes,
and
we
stuff,
did.
yeah.
It
Yeah.
is proportional
Yeah,
to the size
Yeah,
of the undersized lot.
right. And things like you could go out straight from the back even if you were in violation of the set yard, things like that to make it easier to do a proper addition. So we have been slowly making it easier, I think, for people to expand on their houses.
Yeah, we started that by, it was a complaint made that the decks were
Getting caught.
doing a financial burden on residents for decks.
Right, of course,
That-
now
That
get it
was, I
approved
do
and it
believe
doesn't build it.
Phil Decker was going crazy on this, so that's.
We
one
had
of
that
the-
committee.
We had the committee, and in 18 years, I've never seen an application for a deck, ever. I've heard about this imaginary deck, but I've never seen
But
it.
it did bring up the problem that a lot of people had is putting on an addition, they couldn't go
Yes.
straight back because they were already in violation. The whole house was
Then
in
your doors
violation.
are-
So we fixed that.
Yeah.
So I just think we need to look at the FAR and the definitions, especially
Yeah,
if people are gonna be raising their houses due to flooding. That's something we have to start considering now.
Yeah, I mean, it's what what the chairman said. We haven't really ever dealt with FAR, I'm gonna say, since I've been here in 18 years. I don't think these numbers have changed.
Right.
I don't think they have. We've dealt with a lot of other issues, but we haven't dealt with the FAR, and I've been living with that definition.
Can I just ask a clarification question, because I've never heard, what's a patio home?
It's the difference between, there's a duplex and a two-family. depending on where the line is. And then you have a patio home which is connected to a lot line.
Oh, okay.
Okay. One is, I think a townhome is called a duplex.
Right.
Because the
Partition wall.
non-partition wall is vertical. And a two-family is horizontal. And then you have a patio home, which I think has a 0 offset to the property line or
Okay,
something.
yeah, I just,
Yeah,
I've
I
never.
think that's what it is.
You see them a lot in the, survival communities.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay, I see one member of the audience here. I'm gonna open up to the public. Mike, do you have anything you wanna add?
Sure. Mike Irwin, 8 Everett Drive, Somerville. I just want to thank the board for having this discussion. Bernie and I have been talking about the rebirth of downtown Somerville for decades, and one of our themes is how the fact that Somerville embraced a downtown future because we stopped thinking like a suburb and embraced downtown thinking was one of our keys. So I'm a little dubious about floor area ratio. To me, they're a device that suburbs created to reduce density and promote sprawl. So I come in a very negative perspective. I understand there may be a need for that, but I think from a Somerville perspective, I think we have to recognize that we're not some sprawling township, that we have to give room for our uses to breathe, if you will. I was the mayor when we did the hospital zone. We created the hospital zone in order to get it out of the Board of Adjustment. Hospitals are inherently beneficial use, so they would go to the Board of Adjustment. We had no control. We had no control over parking. We had no control over setback. We had no control because it was in a residential zone. So one of the things about having a hospital zone is we have more control over how the hospitals develop. So it develops up as opposed to invading our neighborhoods, which was happening because they didn't have any parking decks and they were parking all through our neighborhoods. So at least I think the idea of looking at the hospital zone in particular, I think makes total sense to give them a little bit of room to breathe. And also I think we need to recognize there's something interesting going on in our pre-OR zone. That's an old zone, but you remember historically Somerville didn't have office development. The offices were going out. They were taking over single-family homes. And instead of having brand new offices downtown, which we have now, we have beautiful Somerville homes into crummy offices. And it seems to be being reversed. That's good. So if the floor area ratio is preventing that goodness from happening, a la the Keller application, then I think we need to look at that as well. And that's it. I mean, I think, no one's wrong here. We're working together as a community to make things better. But things are changing, and I really encourage you to continue on the path that you're doing and rethinking the regulations the way that makes sense for everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Colin, you have anything?
No.
Okay.
I challenge the fact that there was only one public person. There's two of us sitting here.
Is that my public?
Did I not ask you if you had anything to contribute?
I was just challenging your statement, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I'm not going there at all.
Did
you give your address?
I have a question.
No.
I just passed on Veterans Memorial Drive, across from the pickleball courts, that garage that's been falling apart for more than 23 years. My first meeting here, we talked about that. And it's now, the garage doors are broken. I'm sure there's either people or animals or both living inside. It looks like a mess. It looks horrible. If we own it as a town because of a tax issue, can we do something with it?
We don't.
We don't own it.
We don't. They pay their taxes, and it was actually recently bought by somebody else.
Oh, okay, I wasn't sure. I just
So
had
yeah,
the impression that,
I've looked into
Okay.
wanting the town to take it over for recreational purposes and stuff.
Well, the good news is we have had some conceptual plans involving that, which
Yes.
would remove it.
okay,
And it's not at a point beyond concepts at this stage of the game,
Yeah.
so. when we get that concept, or when a potential applicant gets that concept to the point where we can do a conceptual plan for this board moving
Asking to knock it down.
Can the new owners be prompted, controlled, asked to make it safe or make it less dangerous?
By the health department?
Or by anybody, you know.
I don't know, we can try.
I'm just saying,
We can ask.
everybody drives through there and you see it and you go, what the hell's that? Everybody. And so, all right, thank you.
I'll make an inquiry with code enforcement. Mark.
I'll do better, I'll call Leona.
Oh, we'll do both.
I'm sure they don't want rats and people living in there either.
Couple sheets of plywood, they don't look pretty, but they would look prettier than what's there now.
Just so everybody knows about the Keller application, my understanding is going to go to the board for adjustment for the subdivision.
There's no application yet.
No, but it will, that's what
I'm just making sure we're not having an inappropriate
No,
discussion
no.
on the record about a filed application.
No, it's not filed, thank you. And then,
Well,
That's why we
using
keep
my
order.
my understanding is that the council was receptive to moving the lot zoning boundaries.
Right.
So once the lot is created, then the council, should they, could use that lot line as a zone boundary. And then in future applications, the planning board has jurisdiction because it's completely conforming with the B1 zone.
Gotcha. So
Okay.
we're moving the,
You
what are
can't-
we moving into the B1 zone?
What I'm saying is,
Yeah, the gallery.
it was my opinion that you can't carve it out, because if you get that carve out wrong, then you have a split lot.
Yes.
You have to, the proper way is to do the subdivision, and should the council agree with this, then do the zone district boundary right over my lot line.
Right.
So that lot now becomes part of the B1,
And then
the
you don't have
planning
some
board,
issues.
and there's no issues with anything else with that lot, because it's conforming to the B1 zones.
And the FAR issue goes away then, so.
I think that's a great idea, because that use is more of a downtown use.
Yeah, that is
Right.
on the OC, yeah,
So,
it's a
yeah.
secondary, yeah, absolutely.
We want to do my DSA hat on that one. That makes sense.
Right?
Yeah, definitely.
So that's what's going on with that. I haven't, as Kara said, I haven't seen an application, but my understanding is they're trying to expeditiously move this because they want to rehab and get this thing going ASAP. So I assume that we're gonna have something in the next, I don't know, a month or two. And one last thing, we have to do a floodplain ordinance that's DEP required.
Are there new maps?
And I'm helping John Maselli, but we have to get it done, ordinance enacted about the floodplain, what you can do.
Right.
And my thoughts were we should put in the land use ordinance where everything else doesn't make sense. So that if you see a land use, you'll see the floodplain ordinance dovetail with all the rest of the FARs and setbacks and everything else. So I just was trying to get some feedback if the planning board thought that was a good idea. Or should we do an ordinance somewhere else just to go hunting for it? A
Well,
floodplain-
no, I
You can
think,
do it separately. What I'm saying is right now, it's not in the land use ordinance. So when you see me reference 102, 120, blah, 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 it's all in there. Now. The land use ordinance wouldn't be there.
I think first of all, the county planning board has already responded to DEP, but I think we're going to come out with some boilerplate kind of ordinance or suggestions to help municipalities.
I think we have the language. The question now is where to put it. So I was just talking to Kevin, and he was more inclined. I said, Kevin, if you have to get deviations, you're going
you
to
want
the
it all
board.
in one place, yeah.
So to me, it makes sense.
You want it
I
all
was
in
just
one place, yeah.
saying that we have an opportunity to put this land use ordinance, this floodplain ordinance, I'm sorry. And I'm more inclined to dovetail it into the land use so it's compact.
So are these, I'm just curious, like we're making these rules, have we seen the new floodplain maps that were supposed to come out?
The
and
maps
everything?
don't exist yet.
Okay, so like I'm just worried that we're gonna make a policy that might in the end not be a great policy for our particular floodplains because it's incorporating houses and, you know.
The way we've been handling it for the last 18 years is if you're in a flood hazard zone, I say you need DEP approval, show proof. So should the board approve it, we handle it this way on an
Okay.
individual application basis. But the DEP is saying, we want you to say in writing so everybody going in knows what's required. So if I say a condition is you need a flood hazard permit from DEP, and you're not gonna get a building permit, that's not in the resolution, that's in the ordinance. where, and I think Lisa, she knows a lot more about this than I do.
So we are working on, at the county too, with the county planning board, we're working on some updated modeling that will be able to be used. It might not be the official new maps, but we're working with NJIT and Rutgers on getting some new municipalities, because the hazard mitigation plan is going to be updated 2025 is due. So we just started that process, and all this has to get done for every municipality.
So right next to your zoning map, you would have a floodplain map
Yeah.
with the lots. So you're not hunting for Red October.
Right,
So
right.
It's all one spot.
In other words, if you had an application in mind, you would, when you got your permit application, you would see the delineation, oh, my lot is in there.
Right.
I've got to do more than just talk to Borough Hall.
You would know going in.
I've
so
got to call
you
Trent.
wouldn't say, I didn't know this going in. I think that's the concern right now, that
Yeah,
to make
Yeah.
everybody aware of what's going
That-
on,
yeah.
as opposed to being here, and I write a 10, 20-page report, and it's in there, and it's a compliance issue. It's, this board is great. We get one and done, but we usually have conditions that sometimes cause headaches, right, Colin? To say the least.
I think it would also be nice for the homeowners and people and the landowners and the building owners to know what is, if they're in a floodplain, quite frankly, according to the new
Yeah.
information,
And that's the
because
issue
that's
that's
gonna
been-
make decisions for you also,
Right.
you know.
The issue's been residents purchasing homes right after storms, and it's not disclosed,
Right.
because it's not.
Or
flood
people who
zone.
think
It's
because
not
of one
in it.
bad storm, oh my God, I'm in a flood zone, but they're not really in a flood zone. You know,
Or
so-
you own your house for 20, 30 years,
And
and
now you
all of a
can't
sudden
sell it.
now it's different, and now you say, oh no, it's not in the floodplain zone, you don't disclose it, they go do a flood search in
Yeah.
connection with their
So I
title,
think,
and
yeah,
now all of
I
a
think
sudden,
we need,
oh,
as a town, to let people know.
And it also allows grant funding for the residents too.
Yeah.
Once you're in and designated, it opens up opportunities for them that they're not gonna get right now.
We have one redevelopment plan that has flood hazard area,
Mhm.
and of course, we have maps in the plan. We're ahead of the curve here, that's what I'm trying to get you guys to know. Wherever there's an issue, we have the maps in there.
Well, wasn't the garage area was, your hated garage, I think, had a flood, a loop of a floodplain in it, which was one of the problems with one of the concepts, I think.
Yeah,
They
I
could
think a long time ago,
Yeah,
yeah, on Meadow Street, I mean, it's on
Yeah.
Meadow, yeah. It's because it touched on one corner of the building.
Yeah.
So if the board, and Jeremy wants, I can get you email out all the definitions, so you
That
can
would be
see
great.
the attic definition, gross floor, everything that Kara just said about FAR for the next meeting.
Yeah,
if so
let's-
desire.
Let's do that, because I don't wanna let this go and drag on all year. I think we need to make a recommendation on this sooner rather than later.
I'll get it out.
Okay?
I had a question about the floodplain zoning for Jason and for Roger. How does that dovetail over the community we're looking at?
So the committee made recommendations, those recommendations were vetted by separate council. The recommendations were found to not be spot zoning. So I know that the clerk administrator emailed this board to find out when can we discuss those recommendations and move things forward, because it was found to be, because of the situation, that particular area that we were looking at, when we had all our meetings, because it's under a certain duress, that it didn't fall under the guise of spot zoning because of the certain guidelines.
We did look at the hypothetical maps of what the new flooding maps will look like. One of the architects on the board was able to get those.
And it does cover that area,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, so we looked at, the committee that we had, were made up of a pretty decent amount of engineers, and they were, as you know, able to give us some pretty good detailed information that we didn't have access to. So I think that's something that we could definitely share with the board, bring that forward, and also, at least look at the recommendations that the committee came up with as it pertains, because we do have not just that particular zone that we're looking at, but also a few others that would fall, unfortunately, in that, as well as our neighbors, and our neighborhoods. So I think it'd be good if we're going to start talking about land use and bringing the DEP new rules in, if we could start to talk about that and see what this board can do as far as it pertains to protecting and letting our neighbors know, here's what you can and can't do, and here's what we're willing to look at.
So that committee's also now over, we're not gonna
It's actually waiting for this board to hear it.
Correct.
Okay.
We're in a holding pattern right now because we've gone as far as we can go.
Right. And then we'll get
And so the recommendation once it was looked at prior to coming here and wasting people's time, now we know that it can move forward, and so that's kind of where it sits at this point.
Yeah,
I think you're also waiting for the flood maps to come out.
Right, I think it's prudent to wait for some of the mapping to come out so we can see, because, you know, we're liable to make recommendations, and this is something that came out of those meetings, is we're talking about doing this and modifying our zoning, yet DEP was coming out with something that was unknown at the time.
Right, we kept waiting, and we have folks that are, again, engineers, and we work on other planning boards and things along those lines. So everyone kind of cobbled together their resources, and so we had, especially in our later meetings, had much better detailed maps than we did that are currently available to the general public, and some great modeling that a few of our members did as well. Tremendous. I mean, I guess I can't get over this stuff.
They're all going to be at the flood.
Yeah, we should keep them in mind for our planning board
Yeah, one way or the other.
positions.
Yeah.
They were very good, they were excellent.
So I think we could, again, we could bring that information in. I can definitely get that and circulated to everybody, and it would be great. Like I said, if we could start to work that in and take a look at it. That's important.
Thank you.
All right.
Before you adjourn, I just made a note here. You had made reference a couple meetings ago about revising the sidewalk cafe ordinance. And I know the DSA is gonna have another public presentation of their, Mike, what's it called?
Yeah. It's a notarial, it's a streetscape plan.
Yes.
So, here's the idea. We all recognize that Somerville downtown is back, right? And we used to hear Somerville's a great town, but no Morristown, but no New Brunswick. We don't hear any but anymore. Somerville is a great downtown, period. So the question is, how do you take it to the next level? So we engaged a notarial firm that specializes in downtowns, revitalization, kind of do a streetscape plan. We had a public meeting with about 50 people. I think a lot of Mayor Sullivan was there. A lot of the county got some great ideas. So we're now ready to present the ideas, which I think on
March 2nd.
March 2nd. We encourage you to participate, obviously as the planning board, and we have a synergy as to what we can do together to really take downtown Somerville to the next level.
Mike, could you get that Zoom link out to,
It's going
our secretary and
Sure.
distribute it?
Yeah.
It's gonna be a virtual meeting,
Okay.
March
It's
2nd.
a Zoom meeting.
6 p.m.
You'll love it. I mean, it's like some really cool ideas. And it's ideas, right? So we just want to
No, I'm
kick things
excited.
around, and some of them will work and some won't, but I think there's some really cool stuff there.
So in keeping with that, we all know that the sidewalks downtown are valuable real estate.
Yeah,
And I think that, I mean, there's a place for the sidewalk cafes, but there also should be a place for strollers and people walking. So I think at some point, we should work collaboratively to make sure that everybody can share the sidewalks.
A lot of that is covered in these new designs by Arterial that they did. I've been meeting with them as well. A lot of it is based around making sure that there are safe walkways.
6 feet means
And
6 feet, yeah.
Redesigning curb lines and where things go. So I think before we look at making any changes, maybe we want to see where that ends up with.
Yeah, as we always say, there's no more complicated piece of real estate in the world than a really active downtown sidewalk. There's a lot of stuff going on there, a lot of different constituencies. Shoppers, pedestrians, owners, store owners. So how you navigate that, is really hard. And that's what we're trying to do. So we're gonna what we call the downtown Somerville experience. Walk down, you're up to it.
We still need one more thing in town before I die.
French bakery.
No, it's turning the post office into a theater.
Yes.
It's a perfect spot for it.
You have so much support for that.
Oh, We just have to get the post office shifted.
Show up on March 2nd and say that.
Okay, I will, happily.
All right, and
Thanks, Mike. Anything else?
First step.
Did you say the stop sign?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you.
Post office, was built